You want to have us go live? Thank you. Welcome everyone to the Instructional Policy and Student Achievement Subcommittee of the Board. The major agenda items tonight are we're going to start with our continued discussions about our school improvement state designations. Last meeting, we talked about the priority school designation, and tonight we're going to talk about the focus schools with our Director of School Improvement. And then we're also going to do an update on the elementary, college, and career academy transformation, the master planning meeting that was held last week. So why don't we go ahead and start with Mr. Harrington.
All right.
Mrs. Mansfield, that's great. Perfect timing. We were just getting started. We're going to talk about continue our school improvement designation discussion and go to the next level of what's called focus school designation. So go ahead, Mr. Harrington.
All right. So as Dr. McWilliams-Woods stated, last time we met, we talked about priority buildings or priority designations. And tonight we're going to talk a little about focus designations. Currently, we have 13 buildings that are identified as focus buildings. We have 11 elementary buildings and 2 middle schools. If you remember, when we're looking at the data that identified a building as designation status, that was from 17-18 school year data. This actually would have been the year we would have known if a building was moving out of that designation identification. But due to COVID, we're holding steady and we will see. The one thing that I wanted to share is as we look at the identification criteria for focus buildings, it is established as subgroups performing at or below the performance of priority schools or subgroups performing in the bottom 30% and had low performance on the gap closing component of the report card. So those are the.
And you would mind making that just a little bit bigger for our aged eyes.
How's that?
Maybe one more up and then that'd be great. Okay, thank you.
Okay. So if you look at that top, that's where I was reading from, where it says identification criteria. So once again, subgroups performing at or below the performance of priority schools or subgroups performing in the bottom 30% and had low performance on the gap closing component, which is on the report card. To exit, the school earns an overall grade of C or better as determined by the report card grade and earns a C or better for gap closing, and the school meets subgroup performance goals per state requirements. So that speaks to the identification criteria and also the exit criteria. What I wanted to go down to next as I scroll is the school improvement component in the plan. So when we're talking about focus buildings, if you look to the right, you can see numbers 1 through 7 for school improvement components. So that these are the things that we have in place to address our focus buildings. Some of this is overlap of what we talked about as it relates to priority designations as well. But just to go back through, 1, making sure we have teacher mentoring programs, meaningful parental involvement, parents, community, and others. 3, policies, practices to strengthen the core academics, subjects, and address instructional school improvement issues. 4, high quality and continuous professional development for teachers and staff. 5, annual evaluation required only for schools requesting school improvement funding or federal funds. So that speaks to our title buildings. School reform that supports and is supported by teachers, principals, administrators, and other staff. And then a plan to address achievement gaps for subgroups. And that speaks to our improvement plan, or what we categorize as our 90-day plans for our buildings. As we look at the identification, I'm going to stop presenting if everybody's fine with that. As we look at the process for identification of focus schools, as we talk about gap closing and the comparison to priority buildings and that lowest 30%, essentially what the state is doing is looking at the performance index of buildings. And just as a reminder, the The performance index measures the achievement of every student, not just whether or not they reach proficient. So looking at all of those different things, along with the graduation rate for buildings in the district, that's how we establish our focus buildings. And once again, we have 13 of those at this current time. Not as much information as with priority. I know we delved deep into that because of the high need to understand how these buildings were established. And then also, Mrs. Autry, you had asked us to identify or try and go back to determine what a building's designation was on a historical perspective. So from 2011 to current. So we have that information that I was going to share with you. Dr. McWilliams-Woods and myself, we weren't going to go through that because that could be a meeting in itself. But I did want to let you know that we did capture that, and I can share that with you for you to review. And then we can have that conversation a little later if you're fine with that. Mrs. Mansfield, how you doing? I didn't even see you there.
So the focus schools are kind of that next level of need. Priority obviously is the highest need. And as we talked about last time, we didn't have a building in priority status for a number of years. And then the high schools in particular got tripped up because of the new calculation. This one is all about the test scores on that, using that performance index, looking at all the test scores, but also, and what oftentimes is what hurts schools is specific subgroups that are performing as well. So it's kind of two-tiered, could be that the majority of the kids are doing okay, but if you have a subgroup that isn't meeting the standard, then that can get you also in that focus status. And then your 90-day plan then focuses on that particular part of the plan, has to focus then on that particular subgroup. If it's students with disabilities, for example, then that becomes a big focus for that school to try to work to raise that achievement level. But all those components that Mr. Harrington had up, those 8 or 9 components, they all have to be evident, and that's what we get monitored from the state to make sure we're addressing each of those components in those focus schools. And the money then also has to support any kind of money that's provided by the state, in addition to the regular school improvement money, then also has to support those areas. So questions about that? Mrs. Mansfield, Mrs. Autry, does that make sense? Do you wanna, it's gonna be hard where I think we talked about last time, we're in sort of this quagmire where you can't get out of these statuses because everything's on hold right now. So this normally would have been our 3-year point when we'd be looking at it. And we are not going to have any new performance index kind of data that's graded either, because that's all been suspended as well. So it's the suspension in the state results. It's using the test results for a grade on the report card. And then the second part is this year we will not have any new schools going further down the school improvement designation track. But the downside is you can't also get out because you're not showing, you can't show improvement either. So it's kind of, elongating our removal of these statuses.
So then are they just pushing it back a year then? So they'll look at it again next year? Is that?
We haven't gotten any guidance as of yet, but that's what we're assuming. So as we look at things, we're taking it like, okay, we should find out where our buildings will land after this upcoming school year.
Mm-hmm.
And the duality of this, that's always confusing, and it's confusing for us who live this every day too, on what the U.S. Department of Ed owns and what the state legislature owns. Generally, the designations and kind of the consequences of having a designation, the state has to submit a plan to the U.S. Department of Ed and get approved on how they're doing these designations of priority, focus. So there's the U.S. Department of Ed has to sign off on how we're doing these designations, and then therefore how they're using that federal school improvement money that we get. That's why they get such significant say in how the designations work. The U.S. Department of Ed has not waived the requirement for testing, for example. You know, they required everybody to continue to test. They required everybody to still report test results, but you didn't have to do the final grading and the final school improvement status. So that's actually a U.S. Department of Ed piece. At the same time, our state is looking at a whole new report card. And there's been a lot of discussion through state legislators and our state associations to modify and kind of move away from these letter grades that don't really tell you that much in terms of the performance needs of districts, and it's only, you know, really the 90% of our report card is all about test scores, and they want to see more balanced in terms of industry credentials and college and career preparedness and social emotional learning skills and all of the other richness of education. They want to find a way to represent that on the report card as well. So we'll see in this next year what happens, whether we get a new designed report card, whether that will impact what they submit to the U.S. Department of Ed for approval on all of these designations. So it'll be interesting to see. We'll have to watch that. Mrs. Mansfield?
No, what I think is really interesting is if we get back to what testing's really could be used for, it really is there to show you, okay, Joey didn't get it when we went over fractions. And so Joey needs a little extra help. It was never well, I don't know if it, I'm assigning good characteristics and bad characteristics. It shouldn't be used as a way to punish or make a district look bad. It should be about helping Joey do better on fractions.
Right.
So if, you know, it's basic education 101, you pre-test, you teach, and then you post-test. And if you didn't get it, then you go back and you go over the material. So I had someone ask me the other day in a ward meeting, do you think that you lost learning over the pandemic? I'm like, yes. I mean, why would I ever even consider that some didn't, right? Some people excelled and did great, and we'll be able to prove that with testing. But what testing should be able to show us is, you know what, Joey needs a little extra help on that. So, you know, when we hear that somebody is a focus school, or to me, what it means is, okay, we would like to give you a little more help on teaching this. It shouldn't be punitive. And I don't understand why it has ended up coming across that way. It's just a shame. So that was my commentary for the afternoon.
Yeah, I agree. I think if we are going to have some kind of rating system, then it should be based on all the components and the richness of school systems. And we have 600 some school systems in the state of Ohio. They're all very unique in terms of delivery of those services. But certainly to have just a view where it is almost exclusively test scores is where that's a difficult way to actually pick up and show the services and the performance of districts across the state. But I do believe there's movement towards that and support towards that. Other states have certainly gotten a broader lens of how they're looking at districts and what kind of information they share for families to look at. So I think we'll get there, and I think there's good models out there. Whether that'll happen by next year, I'm not sure.
You're so much more optimistic than I am, but I love that about you.
Right. Right. I should say maybe in my lifetime we'll get there. Is that better? Right.
So
All
I
right.
know it's not applicable to us, but I'm just thinking about those schools that have those academic distress commissions. So is that due to 3 years in priority status or 3 years in a focus status? Or can it be both?
That was more along the lines of priority status, but it was before the configuration of how priority status is outlined now. So in that document that I said I was going to share with you, you'll see how a district gets into academic distress, how they could get out of that. And actually, we embedded in that slide that I'm going to share with you a presentation. I think it was from like 2015 or 16. I can't remember exactly off the top of my head, but it speaks to those different components related to academic distress commissions, because priority status at that time was outlined differently than what it is and what I shared last month, I believe.
Yeah, we could, if you would like, Mrs. Autry, we could, after the next meeting, we can talk about the academic watch, which is a state designation too. You'll see that on the chart that Mr. Harrington shared.
Mm-hmm.
We can talk about that, but we could also then talk about kind of the long-term effect of what happens when the state does get more involved with the Academic Distress Commission, and what that looks like these days. You know, it has evolved. I think the state realized that they thought that if they just came in and took over a school district, they could turn it around. And I think they saw the complexity of that, and the complexity and the downside of losing local control and all of that. And the state legislature has tried to shift that multiple times, that whole academic distress focus, and it's not as heavy-handed as it used to be, where they take over the entire district. But it's still something that we need to learn about and know about, for you all to learn about and know about, so that we can see, you know, how it has evolved from the early Youngstown days that we used to talk about a lot in this district.
Mrs. Autry and Mrs. Mansfield, I just started sharing just briefly so you could see what'll come your way. But this is what we tried to capture for you from 2010 to current year or present day. And then when you receive it, you go down to the bottom, you'll see these different links. And within those links, you'll find information on Academic Distress Commission, priority status back in 2010 to current. So I just wanted you to be able to see what will be coming your way.
All right, if there's not any more questions for Mr. Harrington, we'll let him go. Thank you very much. We
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Nice seeing everybody.
See you next time.
All right, Mrs. Otley Kelly, you're up next.
Thank you.
So to launch the next topic of, and this is in the board docs, this is under College and Career Academies of Akron, the 3.01 update. We wanted just to give you an update on the first day of the master planning team. Mrs. Otley Kelly will share that information and talk about sort of the timeline for the master planning process that goes through the fall. And then I also want to make sure we collectively take a look at that timeline on our normal, long spreadsheet that shows every single instructional policy date and the board date, so that we're sure we know where we'd like to put a retreat potentially for the fall, and kind of map that out, because then that will really help drive Mrs. Otley Kelly and Mrs. Tekka's planning for the rest of the summer and fall. So Mrs. Otley Kelly, do you want to present your screen, or do you want me to present? Either way.
I could present.
Easier for you, yeah, that'd be great.
Okay, does that look good to you so far?
Looks great.
Okay, so knowing our two board members that are in front of me, you would have really thoroughly enjoyed our first session, mainly the piece that we heard from our students. So I'm just going to give you an overview and then an opportunity to ask questions, but also to talk about next steps. So last Wednesday, we had a group of parents, students, communities, partners, and APS staff come together for our first elementary college and career academy planning session. And so we wanted to ground everyone in the work that Ford NGL is doing in the district that started at the high school and now is being rolled out at the middle school and coming soon to the elementary. And so we started with the 3 strands that are intertwined with the Ford Next Generation work around transforming the student learning experience, which also overlaps with our transforming the culture systems and structures of schools, in addition to transforming our partnerships. I heard Dr. James say that this transformation isn't just about our students in Akron Public Schools, but it's about transforming the entire community with partnerships. And so that really excites me. And so we therefore need some structures in place and looking at roles and responsibilities. So we made sure everyone understood who our convening partner is, which is our GAR Foundation. We're so excited to have Kirsten Toth on board with us as our community coordinator, which she will be on the committee, of course, with Rachel and with Dr. Ellen McWilliams-Woods and with myself as we partner in leading this work for the district. We will also have a steering committee, which will be meeting actually tomorrow. Some of our partners will be there, and we're going to share with them what I'm sharing with you today. So it will be great to get some insight from you that I can help put into that presentation for tomorrow. And we're going to walk them through what exactly their commitment is as being part of our steering commitment, and who also makes up the committee that may not be in the room. And we're going to go through our tactics. So we're going to start with our portrait of an elementary scholar, which is in direct alignment with our portrait of a graduate. We're going to go over the different skill areas. And this is the piece that I really enjoyed. We had a group of students who, with the leadership of one of our Ford NGL facilitators, they went off and the students got to have the opportunity to discuss, what does this portrait of an elementary scholar mean to them? And then how could they go about acquiring these skills, whether at school or at home or out in the community? And then the students actually came and presented to us as a group. And most of the students, believe it or not, were 3rd graders. We wanted to pick students who would be with us from the beginning of the work, that would be staying in the school and not moving on to the middle school level. And so they'll be with us for 3 or possibly 2 or 3 years. So we're really excited to have them on board. Also, they're going to play a unique role in August as we're going to onboard some additional students. And so the ones that participated in June will have a chance to teach. The ones that were there will teach the incoming students. And then they'll again have an opportunity to present to us. So
And they were unbelievable, Mrs. Autry and Mrs. Mansfield. These kids, I think I have a video of some of them. They got up in front of all these adults, and I mean, they stole the whole show. They presented. It's perfect example of that student leadership, creating an environment where the students can really express them. And what they expressed was spot on in terms of what we need to provide. I mean, it sort of set the tone for the whole day on the types of experiences that we need to give students. They were wonderful.
They were. And one of them even gave us a word that we're thinking about how we could use it in our branding, because we want elementary to be about discovery, exploration. And that was her term that she brought to us, was this is a time for them to discover what's out there and to imagine what problems they can solve. I mean, this is coming from a third grader and I was just blown away. So it was a great experience, and I know you would have enjoyed hearing them. So then as a large group, we went further with that concept of this is a time of exploration and discovery at elementary, to really encourage everyone in attendance to envision what could elementary be without any barriers, just dream big. What could we create at elementary? And so we actually took some time to think about it and to identify some tactics. So what I would like to share with you now are the 9 tactics that we walked away with that we're going to build teams around. So one being student leadership, focusing pre-K through 6th grade, that's at elementary. Social skill development, family engagement, out of school time providers, college and career exploration, business engagement, early learning preschool, portrait of a scholar, instructional shift, and then we're going to end with an activity. And this activity, we're going to ask our partners tomorrow, who's missing? So I'm going to have a list of who signed up to be on tactical teams. And I also have who our co-chairs are going to be. So we have one representative from the district partnered with a community partner. And we're going to do this thought activity around making sure everybody's at the table, as we are currently at the ground level. And we want to have as many voices present as possible. And so our next steps after tomorrow's meeting will be on Friday. We're going to actually meet with the tactical team co-chairs. And then between July and August, the tactical team co-chairs will meet with their committees. We also plan to have a group of parents come together to talk about branding options, so that when they hear the work of what's going on with college and career academies, they understand how it pertains to elementary. So we're hoping to get some ideas from them on what's the best kind of branding to use with our initiative. And then on August, I'm sorry, that should actually be the 11th, we're going to come back together for our elementary master planning session 2 and share the updates from our committee chairs. So I'm going to stop sharing. And if you would like us to now go into the board timeline or give you an opportunity to ask some questions.
Yeah, do you have any questions just about the process and the tactical plans that emerged or the teams that emerged? I hope you see and recognize that they turned out to be, there's common strands now. Obviously, when each team looks at how they have to prepare students for the next level, there's common strands that are emerging, that inquiry-based learning, that positive relationships, embedding social emotional learning standards, the family engagement, and really looking at deepening those systems, the student leadership, the career discovery and exposure type things. Those are all strands that are now cutting across elementary, middle, and high, and just sort of developmentally building on each other. But definitely, Mrs. Autry, it was interesting, based on what you said at the board meeting, some of the same concerns about how do we talk about this elementary, like Mrs. Atley said, it was interesting from the families there that they would say that when a College and Career Academy phone message would come to their house, they would just hang up right away. If it was an all call about College and Career Academies, because they would just hear that and just assume that it was just high school, and didn't have anything to do with them. So that messaging piece is going to be so important, that this isn't, and we're going to have a whole team, and we would love to have, either one of you or Mrs. McKittrick pop into that periodically, or sit in, to make sure that whole communication and messaging piece makes sense of how we talk about that last word. Maybe it's not academies at the elementary, maybe it is just that college and career discovery, or college and career exploration, or college and career whatever. And then middle school, we pick the next word, and then the high school becomes, that's where we use that term, the academies. Or, fortunately, we have Marcia Pullman who can really help us. Her background in the private sector is all about branding. And so she knows how to take a big comprehensive system and how do we brand it in a way that makes sense for elementary, middle, and high. And she's the one who keeps pushing on us that we got to get families and kids together in a room and get that feedback to make sure the messaging resonates with them. But I so appreciated, Mrs. Autry, what you said about that career discovery and career exposure. It has to, those experiences, we can't wait till middle school to have them start to happen. We're not asking kids to decide, for heaven's sake, what they want to do at the elementary, but they have to see the possibilities. They have to aspire to, and understand and see where all of these different jobs are out in the community. I think that exposure, and that is actually required as part of our curriculum too, that we have to, in state standards, there's all sorts of curriculum about learning about your communities and learning about jobs in the community. So that's not just an APS thing, that's a required piece of our curriculum as well. So let me go ahead and cast our timeline here, our board timeline. This shows, and we periodically use this format to map out these sort of long-term ways that we need to come together with the board to map out something as significant as this 5-year master plan. So we have here all of the finance committee meetings, instructional policy, board of ed, legal policy, all the way from now till the fall. And so here's our first master planning session. And then as we go through the summer, as Mrs. Atley Kelly said, on August 11th will be the next session. In the meantime, the tactical teams are meeting, designing, doing their work. They've got all sorts of community partners, and tomorrow they'll be Mrs. Atley Kelly will be working with the steering committee, which is our 60 some people from the community and teachers and principals who are on the steering committee. They'll also be providing feedback on who else should be in the room for the tactical teams. But then as we, then finalize, kind of getting the August and September is to sort of finalize those plans after that second master planning session, do any kind of honing, staging of the 5 years. And then we'd be looking at this kind of November timeframe for approval. So then when you start to backward plan that, we could bring, final draft of key concepts would be around October. We'd obviously be updating you, this committee, all the way along. And we can present key concepts to the board in October. We could do the budget review, and then usually we schedule some kind of retreat, and then we do the final prep and instructional policy and bring it to board. So I think I can't see you on screen right now, but whoever has a question, go ahead. And
that's me, Miss Autry. I didn't know if I was looking at the right screen. Should I be looking at a timeline or?
Oh, sorry. No,
I can see a frame.
That. Let me try again. I must have done my just a window. There we go.
There.
There. Now you see it?
Yes.
Thank you, Miss Autry. I was like, am I?
I thought it was me. I'm like, wait a minute.
That probably looked very confusing. No, those were just our tactical, our major strands that you were looking at. That's funny. Okay, let me go through that again. So here we are in June, and then these are the finance committees are in blue, instructional policies green, our regular Board of Ed meeting in yellow, and legal policy in red. So as we go through, we'll have the tactical teams will be meeting, all through the summer. They'll come again and present their initial proposals to say, here's what we're thinking by August 11th. Then after that, we'll continue to do any kind of honing of the plan, and we'll be opening school at the same time, August and September. And then we get over to when we kind of jump to in November is where, if this is when by the end of November, we'd like to have the plan finalized and voted on, then if you start to backwards plan, then that would give us this last instructional policy meeting to do any final prep. We normally have some kind of retreat that Mrs. Otley Kelly and Mrs. Tecca could dive deeply into the master plan and make sure the board is comfortable. We would do any kind of budget review with the finance committee November 15th. We could do the first presentation October 25th, somewhere around there, to the board to present all the key concepts. You all could see that first on October 22nd, sort of the final review of here's all the key concepts, do any final feedback input before we would prepare for the board meeting. But obviously we would give you an update, every single instructional policy committee meeting. The rest of August and September, we would give you an update. So does that look okay in terms of how we would stage it? It looks like it's a long way away, but then, as we know, going through the summer and then opening school, this will probably go really quickly, actually.
I wonder if the retreat's early enough. I know there's so many things. I love the idea that we've had it and finance has had it. And then the retreat kind of brings those two pieces together, or has in the past, right? I mean, that's the good part about it, is that we bring what both of those committees have looked at with a fine tooth comb to the whole board and put those pieces together. It just doesn't give a lot of time for if there are extra questions, or somebody wants something to go back. Mm-hmm. Just throwing that out there. I mean, when we've done it as like a breakfast meeting, those seem to work really well, and we've been able to do that with the others. I'm just a little worried about it being too close, especially if we really want it to pass in November rather than waiting into the December meetings, because the December meetings are just so, there's usually only one, and et cetera.
we could, I mean, if we wanted to, we could do the budget review here on that November 15th. We could move that to before the board, this first round of the board, and then do the retreat right after that.
Yeah, maybe that would work. Just to push it back just a little, to give just a little buffer.
Yeah. Or we could try to do the board presentation here on October 11th and then schedule the retreat.
In October.
That gets us across there's another board meeting on November 15th. So maybe it's better, which I think maybe was the sequence for the middle school, that we did the budget first, then we did the whole board presentation. I can't remember. The sequencing was a little bit different for middle school, and then we still held the retreat. That seems like 20 years ago, doesn't it? We could do the budget review here. We could definitely, I mean, we'll be reviewing the key concepts. You're not going to have any, but we could move that for sure, here. Does that look better? Mrs. Autry, what do you think?
It gives us a buffer.
Mm-hmm. And then we would move the retreat someplace in here. We would just look at scheduling it sometime in here then. It doesn't necessarily, I mean, it may not be the day after, or a couple days after. It could be sometime in that first week or two of November.
Just remember, Capitol Conference is back in person, and it's in there somewhere, and the election. So,
those two little things.
Those two little things.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a whole nother conversation. We'll have a little offline on that one.
Capitol Conference. Okay, I'll look at those dates to make sure. That might impact the Board of Ed meeting. Don't we usually have to move one of these meetings around for that too, usually? Maybe we've already done that.
I think it's later this year. Just, I'm trying to remember, but trying to pull it up too.
Okay.
Seems like it's around the 9th of November. It usually falls around my birthday.
Yeah, it looks like we might have to move the board meeting. That's the 8th, because that's when Capitol Conference is.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes we move it to the Thursday.
Well, I have it on the 15th. What day of the week is that?
Oh, the board meeting's on the 15th. So we've already moved it.
Okay. So it must be earlier that week. So if we wanted to do a retreat, we would definitely need to do it that week before.
Yeah, that's when Capitol Conference is, and that's when the election is. Both of them, I think.
Okay.
Or the election might be the 2nd.
The election is the 2nd.
Election is the 2nd, and Capitol Conference is
the following week. Mm-hmm.
And then the board meeting's the week after that.
Mm-hmm.
And you said this is the 8th through probably like the 10th or something?
The 7th through the 9th.
7th through the 9th.
7th,
Okay.
8th, and 9th is Capitol.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll have Ruth look at possibilities for us, because we probably, if Dr. Akbar and Dr. Hall would like to do the same format with the retreat, I can talk to them to see about scheduling it. You know, trying to work around these two important dates here. But sometime after the 25th, that we present there. But just to give enough time, you know, maybe it's that second week around this week of when the finance committee is. Maybe it's that week. So we'll see. We'll look at all of the available time in there. But knowing how difficult it is to get everybody, you know, scheduled, we'll have to make sure we jump on that right away and get it on the books. I think that'd be important. All right, any other questions for Mrs. Outley Kelly? Because we'll let her, did we hit everything, Ms. Outley Kelly, we did?
Yes, I was just wondering, do you see any red flags thus far? Anything that you would like the committee to consider now that you've got an overview that we can take back and use for tomorrow to tweak?
I like it, and I like just having the kids in the forefront like that.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's really, really key at this age.
Mm-hmm.
I love how the family engagement, I know, Ms. Autry, I know you mentioned that particularly in the last board meeting, talking about how this is when parents are the most involved. So we should definitely, you know, strike while the iron's hot, as they say. So I love that that was right off the bat. That wasn't, you know, deeply buried. It was right there.
And I would just like to give kudos to our administrators who selected the parents and the students, because, oh my goodness, they were so actively engaged and they were just phenomenal. And they look forward to continuing the work with us. So that's important.
Yeah, that was the best part, is they really want to be on the teams that signed up to be involved in everything. It was just wonderful. And the students wanted to come back the next day. And you know what they loved the most was the cubicles. They got to have some time to go tour and go to some places during some of the day. And they loved the cubicles, and they wanted to come back and present the next day. It was so adorable. So we'll definitely, we already debriefed on plans to continue to have their voice, you know, right in the forefront, like you're saying, Mrs. Autry, next time as well.
How many students were there? And were there different schools or mostly from the same school?
They were from, I want to say, 2 of our North Hill schools. And so they we did have some students that represented our EL population. They were primarily from Harris Jackson and also from Findlay.
Okay.
But each of our schools had the opportunity. Please keep in mind something that we learned after the fact, or I should say we realized after the fact, was students who were selected were also part of our summer camp. And so when we realized they were in camp, and some of them actually had a field experience, an essential experience that day, we told them not to give up soapbox derby, go out, enjoy yourself, and we would pick them up in August. So so we will make sure we gave each principal an opportunity to nominate someone. So we will go back and revisit who was invited, and we will invite them back to the August session.
Okay.
So thank you for letting me share this with you, and I will see you next time.
All right, thanks.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, the only other topics that I had, and then any other areas that you would like to talk about, I did showcase a few items in the board docs on our agenda that are curriculum oriented. They're not necessarily new items, most of them, but I just wanted to reinforce the industry credential partnerships that we have in purchasing. You'll see almost every board meeting there's, because of our expansion of the industry credentials that we're offering and supporting students, you'll see regular purchases of the resources that support that or the test itself. One of those, for example, this time is the Penn Foster National Retail Foundation. They have a Rise Up voucher for student industry credentials that we use. So that's in there for that particular industry credential. And then we have the renewed cooperative agreement with Bridgestone is going to board. So now they've signed on to continue as a named partner. We have the New Tech Network, the continuation service agreement with them going to board this time that we've talked about here some, or especially Mrs. Autry, you and I have talked about. So this is the continuation of the membership agreement that we have with them that's going to board. And then there's one item for Edmentum. And just as a reminder, that is the provider that we use for APS Online. And one of the things that I wanted to update you all on is our continued discussions and planning for remote learning for the fall, that we have been meeting with Edmentum, this company that we've used for years in the district through APS Online, and we use some of their digital platforms for individualized intervention and enrichment. It's called ExactPath, but then they also have the whole platform that we use for our 100% remote students prior to the pandemic. That's who we partnered with. We've been looking specifically at the elementary in APS Online because previously it was more self-directed. And we know, and what we've learned obviously through the remote education that we've done this past year and a half, is especially for elementary, and I believe for all kids, but particularly if you think about a first grader trying to just navigate independently in a self-directed way is nearly impossible in this online environment, unless you're a family member or someone the family member brings on is sitting side by side with them and helping them through that process. So we've been looking with Edmentum on options to be able to have live instruction continue and to be able to provide that in the 4 core content areas. So we had a meeting where they talked about how they offer that to build that in with their teachers, but using their platform that we've used for years, but actually doing live instruction in reading, math, social studies, and science. So we're continuing to look at that. We're looking at some pricing models to make that happen. I will keep you updated on what that looks like before we would actually bring it to board for approval. But I'm thrilled that they're looking at offering an option to do the live instruction, because I think that's absolutely critical for us to have that, especially with the young students. And they also offer some intervention too.
Yeah, that's one of the most common questions I'm getting lately. Everyone's concerned that we're not going to have remote learning anymore. I guess some districts have opted to go back totally live. So, yeah. I mean, I've shared with people. I mean, it's our intent that that's going to continue. Yeah. With improvements. Right.
The advantage for us, which most districts don't have, is we had this whole APS Online infrastructure and platform before. We knew that the elementary was, even before the pandemic, it really only serviced more of the homeschool families because of the need for someone to be working with the student, because it was more self-directed curriculum. So we knew that wasn't, if we were going to continue remote, we wanted to have some kind of live instruction offered, since that went so well over that 18 months that we did it ourselves. So being able to continue with the same partnership. The other huge advantage of using APS Online is they have the infrastructure to track attendance and progress that you need if you're running an online school system every single day post-pandemic. You know, you've got just, if you remember what happened to ECOT, that got into huge problems because they were counting students that weren't actually making progress and performing in the school system, and they had to shut down and give millions back supposedly. I'm not sure if they ever did, but they had all sorts of problems with that. We would never want to get in that situation. And to be a successful online school, you have to have this infrastructure. It's a student information learning management system to be able to track all that and count that and monitor to make sure you are legitimately counting students, following all the rules for the state. So APS Online has that in their Ed Options Academy is what they call it. And we've used that for years, but we wanted to have that additional live instruction for the elementary. And they have offered that, and we're just looking at it. We just met last week and had a whole session for a couple hours with them to learn more about it. So we'll be bringing it to Mrs. Fowler-Mack and talking through with our team. And then I'll let you know, kind of where we land with that for before we bring it to the full board. But yes, just to make sure it's really clear, Mrs. Audrey, we will have, and you can assure the community that we will have some type of APS Online option for families. And within the next, hopefully few weeks, we should be able to start sharing that out so that families can make that decision. Where our goal was to try to wrap up a recommendation to you all by the end of June, so that families would have plenty. By the time we bring it through the board, they'll have, middle of July, they'll know exactly what they're choosing if they decide to stay remote, and then we'll have people make a commitment at that point. Okay. I believe the only other thing on the agenda are the updates, our regular updates. So if you can take a look at those and showcase, like you do so well, anything that you see at our board meeting from those updates. But everybody provided you one this time. Okay. And look at that, it's 5:30. I don't think we've ever done that. The last words were right at 5:30. Any questions or things you're hearing in the community from our constituents that we need to discuss tonight? We're good? All right. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it. And if you have any questions from what Mr. Harrington sends you, just let him know or let myself know, and we can do individual calls if you need to kind of talk through anything that he sends you. Okay?
Okay.
All right.
Sounds good. Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Ryan.
All righty. Bye-bye.
Bye now.